Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Kevin Can F Himself. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, I love the opening. It's just basically Kevin stealing a Kevin Hart thing, announcing like, oh, he's going to be live somewhere. And it's like, oh, just because it has his name. It's like, I'm going to cover up all the stuff. It's like, we're going to put this on the house and everything. Apparently, this was like 4 years ago. And Patty had an idea of like, oh, we'll like use a pulley system and stuff like that. But also, is Home Dude not their dad? I was under the impression he was. I mean, maybe that like Kevin's dad, but everyone else has different parents. Because like the way like Patty was like, oh, my dad. So it's like, I guess like maybe there's same moms, different dads type of situation. So maybe that's Kevin's dad and no one else. I don't know. Like I said, I could be wrong, but they call him by his first name. But that could just be like now we call our dad by his first name. Like at least in like Neil and Kevin's case, I don't know. They did that way they worded that made me go like, oh, like she's like my dad, made me go like, oh, so you guys don't have the same dad, maybe you have the same mom, whatever the case may be. But it's that situation, and I think that's why Patty just kind of goes along with being one of the boys, because it's like when she throws out ideas, like they're such idiots. It's like, okay, it's like, oh, the whole police says, oh, we only need to go out one roof, and it's just like, okay. Not what I was talking about. It's just like, no point in me trying to have an intelligent conversation around you guys. Let's just bro it out and just kind of go along with it. I think that just, that moment just kind of cements how Patty just kind of like gave up. That was probably one of the last things I'm like, you know what, I'm not even going to try anymore. So hence why we are where we are present day with Patty. But we learned a little bit more about how she got to where she is, pill-wise and stuff like that. So initially she picking up pills and stuff like that to do running place. Terrence is like, hey, so, and then we do see like, I didn't realize at that time it was Kurt that she was kind of waving to it the first time she was there 4 years ago. So I'm like, I wonder, is that how that like started or something? I don't know. Or maybe they were already dating at the time, whatever the case may be. But visiting, Terrence is kind of low key being like, yeah, I could hook you up with some generics. She's like, no, this is good. He's like, no, like, let me hook you up with some generics. So it was Terrence's idea, but she was immediately like, no, you got a degree, got a good job. Like, don't get mixed up in that shit, Terrence. But going to work, she ends up working on this lady, and it turns out like, oh, she's like, oh, my sciatica's kicking in, and I don't have the money, I don't have the insurance to get the pills I need. But she's like, I'm good. And that's where Patty started her whole pill thing, which is like, oh, you started off with the most like altruistic thing of like, right, you're just trying to help people, and yeah, now it's become like a side hustle. Which immediately I didn't think about it until like the opening title card started rolling. Which I appreciate that this is one of those shows that's like, oh, it's one of those things where it's like it has a different title card like every episode. I always think that's so interesting when shows kind of go like do that like to a certain extent, you know. I always say that's interesting. But what crossed my mind was like, you don't think the guy from last episode that OD'd in the library was one of her customers? It's like, I don't think so, but it still could be a possibility. I mean, granted, I would assume there's other dealers that we're just not aware of, because I'm sure she wasn't the only one Terrence was trading stuff up. Because a part of me was wondering if it was Marcus, because he's connected to all that. But it's like, no, because that's why he set Allison up last episode, like with the whole like, oh, she's actually trying to like trick a, like setting up a deal like, oh, you're going to get him pills, when in actuality I lied and told the dude that you're a prostitute. That whole situation, like his whole thing was like he didn't give her any pills because he doesn't do that. Like his thing is coke. So I'm like, maybe, so I don't think it was him. So I was like, maybe it was it was the main reason for that plot line was just to throw out there like, oh, people OD, and it gave her the idea of like getting pills, setting her off on basically what seems to be the main plot of the season, getting some oxy so that you can make Kevin like die from it and make it seem like he just had an overdose. Besides all that, what I thought was actually kind of interesting about the opening, and it's actually kind of throughout the episode, is actually something I brought up last episode where I was like, oh, it's interesting like when you pay attention to that, the entire story is told from Allison's perspective. Even when we switch between reality and a comedy, it's always from her perspective. The first time we broke that was at the beginning of the episode, like 4 years ago, because we got Patty's perspective throughout this episode. Not fully, but it is interesting. Like, oh, I thought we were just going to keep the narrative thing of Allison, but it's like, okay, we're getting Patty's perspective. I'm curious, does that mean other characters? I doubt we'd ever get Kevin's perspective. I mean, maybe they could do that, but I think it's always going to be from Allison's perspective, maybe. But I thought maybe something with Neil, but then I was like, no, it's probably like Patty and Allison for particular reasons. Like they're kind of like the perspectives like we get to really see. I think we'll have to wait and see if they kind of change that going forward. But obviously we go back to present day where it's like, Allison's like, oh, I'm just here for okay, I'm here for the pills, and it's like, okay, why? And she's just kind of like, oh, I have a bad day. It's like, no, you're a liar. And she's like, you're terrible at lying. Even you don't believe what you're saying. She's like, okay, I just need the pills. It's like, well, I'm out, so come back Monday. She's like, oh, really? And she's kind of getting excited and stuff like that. And just Patty's like, I'm done with you. Just get out, leave, go away. You know, so we also get introduced to Patty's like personal life, her boyfriend Kurt. It's like, oh, we're supposed to be on a diet or whatever, but she kind of like plays along. It seems like they live a pretty boring life because it's like, oh, he's like, we're watching Ray Donovan. I'm assuming a sex scene pops up because Ray Donovan's known to have a few sex scenes or so. So I was like, we hear moaning in the background, and he's like, oh, do you think we could? She's like, I'm tired. I'm like, oh, just maybe it's probably kind of a similar thing maybe to Allison of just kind of like, it's like, why are you with Kurt? Why not? Maybe it's simply as that, you know, which once again is kind of a depressing, you know, sentiment to have to be in a relationship. But, you know, it might be a thing of like, not many other prospects in town, and he's better than nothing in being alone. I mean, part of me is like, as miserable as you seem like you are sometimes, it probably would be preferable just to be alone because you wouldn't be forced to be in a diet that you don't want to be in, apparently, you know? So that's another thing, another angle to it. But before we get to that, obviously, like a big part of the episode is also about like the also like really quickly, I love like how Kevin screwed up so many like, I guess idioms would be the right word, where it's like, oh, people he's lazy, sleeping on his Laura's. His Laura's? It's like, instead of sleeping on his laurels, it's like, yeah, when you sleep with a Laura and then like she doesn't want to get up and she's lazy, and it's like, there was another one he did near the end of the episode. I'm like, I love how you completely I'm blanking on what it was. I should have wrote it down, but it was just like, I was like, I love, you know, I mean, people mess up. I definitely mess up idioms, like anecdotes and idioms like that all the time. And you know, regardless, it was just interesting. But basically, it's about the chili that they're making. And usually it's Neil and Kevin working together. And it's like, oh yeah, the guys who plow the brothers that plow our street or whatever, like do it extra early and better than everyone else is because we give them this chili that's pretty damn dope. So, but Allison kind of steers the pot by being like, oh, but isn't like kind of turning Neil and Kevin against each other. At first, I like later on conversations maybe go like, did you not plan that? It seemed like that was pretty on plan. That was pretty planned. But then later on, when she's outside eating a burger, it's like, what are you doing? It's like, oh, I got this for myself because I figured I deserve a reward for such a good job. I was like, oh, so you did definitely do that on purpose. Like that's your reward for causing some havoc. But then it's like, right, 30 seconds later, it didn't work out for her because like for a moment she's happy and everything. It's like, I was able to. It's kind of, which is actually super messed up. It's like you on purposely messed up things between Kevin and his brother, so you'd be less likely having to deal with them. But then it's like, oh, it turns out it didn't work out because now Kevin wants to drag you into making the chili, and Neil's going to go off on his own to make his own chili. So they're kind of at each other's throats about that. So, which I love. Patty's like, because at first it's like, oh, I can't believe you can make something that has nothing to do with you all about you. And she's like, all right, you feel that way? How about you go in there and deal with Kevin's chili hysteria, or you go with Neil? And she just kind of has quiet for a couple of seconds. She's like, I knew it. You hate them as much as I do. She's like, I don't hate them. She's like, yes, you do. And she's like, I knew it. It's like, all right, could you, that's why you're selling drugs. She's like, can you be cool? She's like, I enjoy being right more. And like, I love that. But it is a situation that you could definitely tell, like, she definitely does hate her brothers. It's like, she just tolerates them enough. That's why she, like I said, she bros it up just to be around them because it's less of a headache. Because if she tries to be intellectual or fight them on it and just try to correct them, it's like, no. She could make her jabs, being super sarcastic. That's her. I think those are her small victories here and there. Just like Allison needs her small victories, like screwing things up between Kevin and Neil. Another angle to this is obviously Sam and Allison talk, and it's kind of an apology about everything. It's like, right, she didn't like all the stuff that he was kind of saying, and he's like, well, yeah, but he was also like, he kind of owes her an apology. Like, obviously, he's like 8 years sober. He's about to actually get his sobriety chip for 8 years. And for him, it's about making amends. And he never made, like, Allison was one of the people at the top of that list, and he never made amends. So that's what he was kind of frustrated. And that's why he kind of said what he shouldn't have said. But, they're mending fences. But it's like, oh, we should usually bring someone there. So would you mind going? She's like, oh, cool. So because of that, she actually goes to Patty about, no, I actually want you to work on my hair and everything, and kind of opens up about it. It's like, we find out a little bit more about her and Sam's relationship. They were never actually officially dating, as like they worked together in high school, and then they would fool around and like in front of like the tortilla chips and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, it's like for her, it's like, he had a girlfriend, Jen, with two N's, and it's like, because I didn't know her, it didn't feel as terrible. And it's like, but now you're going there. Well, you're going to go there to full on. She's like, no, he's married. And she's like, you are too. She's like, yeah, of course, we're both married. I'm like, I love that it didn't immediately go, he's married and I'm married. It's like, he's married. It's like, what about you? Right, I'm married too. Oh yeah, just because I can't forget, just because I'm plotting to kill my husband, I'm not. It hasn't gotten rid of the fact that I'm married. I'm not a widow yet, so I just think that's interesting. But it's like, because she talks about the fact is that, because what had happened was Sam kind of liked the fact is that with her, he's like, you make me, it was one of them that was saying like the other person makes him feel like they haven't changed. And it's like, to me, you haven't. I think that was, Allison saying that to like Sam, like, oh, you haven't changed, you are still the same, at least to me. But what I also thought was pretty dope is we start, like, even though it seemed like, oh, maybe like, it's like, oh, like they're not really friends. Patty keeps her distance from like Allison and stuff like that. But this episode, like, she kind of opens up a lot more to Allison, even to the point like opens up about like, right, Kurt wants me on this diet, but like I was eating like 3 cheeseburgers before, like that cheeseburger we had on your staff, yeah, that was like the third one I had this week. And it's just like, really, like they're kind of gossiping and actually legitimately being friends. It's like, we've been sister-in-laws for like 10 years, because she even says it later on, because like there's a whole conversation like, why are you asking so many questions? She's like, I don't know, because I want answers. It's like, why? She's like, the fact of the matter is, we've been in the same rooms for 10 years, and I didn't know anything about you. You're selling drugs. I'm buying drugs. Like, it's like, not unless Kurt knows about this. And she's like, no, because she was like, not unless Kurt's like a drug mule or something. It's like, no, he doesn't know anything about this. Because it is a situation of like, right, I think for Allison, it's like, right, like I thought like I was the only outlier in this family, but it turns out, no, I'm not alone in this. And I think she found some camaraderie there. I don't know why I said that word, camaraderie there between her and Patty. And I think that makes her feel not as alone. And it's still frustrating, but I think she's still not as alone in the family as she thought. She was like, oh, I'm surrounded by idiots. But it's like, no, we could have easily been getting along from the beginning, but we both kind of isolated ourselves from each other, when in actuality, against these idiots in this family, we should have been joining forces, So I just thought that was kind of an interesting development. Like I said, them like hitting it off like that was actually pretty dope. It actually made me feel good, because like, another element I was curious about is it definitely did seem like Patty was kind of reluctant to keep doing this drug stuff, because especially when that lady came in being like, oh, no, I need it now. You want me to just pop some ibuprofen? No, give me this. I was like, oh, even if you were helping in the beginning, Oxy is very addictive. So these people it might not just be about the pain anymore. It might be just withdrawal. So it's like, no, I'm going to get some more Monday. It's like, I can't wait till Monday. It's like, okay, I'll try to figure something out. Thanks. She kind of screws the pooch on her deal with Terrence, at least kind of upsets him, because it's like, right, she's never supposed to call. Because I guess that leaves like a trail that it's like, right, everything could lead back to him if anything happens. It's like, oh, look at these phone records. And because police do check phone records. So I guess that's the concern. One of my favorite things, too, is, like, Marcus seeing Allison is talking mad shit, and she decides, like, the moment she picked up her phone, you're going to call 911 on me. And it's like, yeah, there's this man I saw him outside of an elementary school. He's a drug dealer. I was like, I just don't want this man just getting young children hooked on drugs. It's like, thanks, bye. I was like, yeah, ultimate middle finger to him. So I thought that was pretty dope. She went home, put on a new dress, and ended up running into Kevin, who's coming in with the pig, and he's planning on cooking it, and he wants Allison to be there, but Allison's like, oh, I got a work thing, you know? And he's like, it's like, nah, you know, I'll be doing it, because usually I guess Neil handles a lot of that prep side of things like that, so he wanted Allison nearby to make sure everything. She's like, oh, you want me? She's like, all you have to do is heat it up and then make sure you don't fall asleep. He's like, no, there's more to it, you know. It's like, anytime Neil and he's like, the neighbor guy, you know, so it's like, but she gets chili sauce on herself. I was like, oh, that sucks. Every little thing Kevin has to screw up. But she went to Sam's meeting, and he said something I thought was really interesting, that for him, it's like, he hasn't really dealt with any, like, destructive behavior, like, in a long time. And Allison had this look on her face, like, I was curious whether she was kind of like, because she was getting super flirty because she was putting her leg behind his and just, like, they're smiling at each other and everything. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Super flirty. But part of me wondered, did she internalize that? I was almost looking at it as, like, I thought afterwards she was going to be like, hey, I got to go. I'm sorry. Like, you don't need to destruct this stuff in your life. And me being a part of it, like, I'm just going to blow it up. So I thought that's what it was. I mean, there's still a possibility of her blowing his life up because his marriage and everything. But I'm like, I don't know. It seemed like she kind of took away from that, like, the whole thing of, like, right, like, getting rid of destructive behavior. And it's like, right, we're not teenagers anymore. Because she had even brought that up, like, being around him made her feel like she was 15 again, you know? And that's what's kind of like why she kind of flipped out the way she did last episode. But then Jen, which I didn't realize, like, oh, Jen's your wife. I knew you guys were dating back in high school. I didn't know, oh, she's your high school sweetheart type of thing. Which is also crazy because it's like, oh, you married to the woman that you and Allison were kind of sleeping behind her back. Like, that's interesting. And it's like, oh, hi. It's like, oh, there's a pinto bean in her hair and everything. So it's like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna get out of here. It's from a chili. And then before she could even go in the house, she was just kind of like, ugh. I don't know whether she was planning on going through the back because... I don't know whether it's because she was like, because she does kind of throw down her purse and she's kind of frustrated. I guess she's like, I'm not just going to go in here and pretend like, I was like, fine, I'm going to check on Kevin. And it's like, because even Patty was like, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. She's like, yeah, and just have to listen to Kevin, like, complain about it and whine about it, you know, so... But she goes back there and the pig was still cooking and she fell asleep and they were both asleep and the pig got burnt and he doesn't want to chop the pig because he's like, oh, it would be murder. It's like, you were cooking the pig. It was already dead. He's like, yeah, but we created a bond. He's like, you know, you were late. He's like, yeah, she's like, but I slept back here. And he's like, yeah, but we created a bond over all this stuff. He's like, could you be filling that hole in your heart, you know, for the whole Neil thing? And he was like, no. So... But now it's like, well, you could always go vegetarian. He was like, vegetarian chili, might as well not give them any chili at all. Like, it'd be worse than giving them no chili, you know? So, and then Patty's talking to Kurt, and he's like, oh, like, she's like, can we get some real food? He's like, what? She's like, no, I'm tired of, like, when I'm speeding here, shoveling cheeseburgers out my face, just like, I'm getting heartburn from it. So, can we order some real food, you know, fats and carbs, animal fat and all that? He's like, right. She's like, and chimichangas, you know, so. And as she's, you know, about to go get her resupply from Terrence, we find out Marcus sold him out. Which I also love, one of the cops is freaking Kevin Chapman. I was like, dude, come on. I love he should get put in so many cop roles. But the most recent thing I saw him in, he was in the episode of Equalizer, kind of a scumbag. Which is interesting. I always feel bad because Kevin Chapman always gets put in, like, the roles I kind of best know him for him, he's always kind of playing, like, a dirtbag. I mean, like, he had a shift in person of interest. He started off a dirtbag, became such a great dude, became, obviously, a lovable character as Fosco. But then you, like... take him in The Equalizer. He was a scumbag. The character I'm thinking of is him in City on a Hill, which is very much like the character he was playing there. Obviously in this, but just much more scummier. And I love that, like, the cop, she was like, yeah, if you screw us on this, the fact of the matter is, when you get sent to jail, I'll tell everyone that you touch kids. And then Kevin Chapman's character looks at her, she's like, almost like, I'm not really going to do that. I was like, that's kind of messed up. Because it's like, right, you saying that this person is peddling drugs is like saying, like, oh, a father, like a priest, is actually a drug dealer and stuff like that. So Terrence ends up getting busted just when Patty was about to pick up the drug. So it worked out in her favor that Kurt kind of pulled her aside just wanting to talk about last night and everything. But poor Terrence. I mean, she literally said, like, 4 years ago, like, I don't get mixed up in this. You got a good job, got a degree and everything. And sadly, that all came crumbling down in this moment. Poor bastard. But that was kind of an awakening moment for Patty, because it's like, right, now I have to leave it alone. Especially looking at that cop as she was leaving. It's just like, right, that could have easily been me. This is too dangerous. I don't want to be mixed up in this. And at the same time, Kurt's running his mouth, and then he's proposing to her. And it's like, there actually was no ring, because he proposed to me I love that whole thing. And like, obviously, I love that. It was kind of cute. Allison be like, oh my God. And when she hears this from Patty, and she tries to move the salon chair and barely moves it like a centimeter, and it just hops in the chair. And it's like, oh my God, like, tell me all the deets. Like they're besties, like they're girlfriends. I love that. But now it's a thing of like dealing with that, and obviously Allison's stressing out because it's like, right, Patty's going dry, and it's like, oh, I can't deal with this. I need the pills, because it's also her undoing. She screwed herself in this particular regard, because she turned Marcus in, and Marcus turned Terrence in response. So it's like, I kind of created this problem. I'm curious if Allison had said something. I'm curious, would Patty have been mad at that point? She probably wouldn't, because she was relieved. Like, yeah, I need to get out of this drug game anyway. It's scary and dangerous. But I forgot what was the reason why. Oh, right, because she's like, nah, I can't help you right now. I got to go home and take care of Neil. He burned his hands trying to cook them. And like the meat's fine, but the chili's ruined. And then you have Allison like, well, I have an idea, but we can't suggest it. We have to make it seem like ending hard cut to him. Like, it was our idea. And then like the dad is kind of like, oh, maybe you guys should spend some more alone time. And then Allison and Patty were like, no. I think they're good. Because it's like, right, this is no longer Kevin Chili. He's like, our chili. So they're good now. It's like, oh, we're so smart combining all these ingredients. It's like, cool. You guys are, you're so great. And then hard cut to like, Patty and Allison walking out and just looking at the pig. And it's like, why do you need the pills so badly? And so Allison uses the story that Sam told about, like, he got so blacked out drunk that he stole some dude, Jason or something's pills. I'm like, because I was about to say, look, are you going to tell her the truth? And it's like, oh, yeah, she might not like her brother, but she might not be too keen about you trying to kill her brother, which is sad, because it's like, oh, there was a budding friendship here, but now it's built off of dishonesty, which is like, I mean, they're up to shady stuff, so what's dishonesty amongst thieves and criminals? It's that type of thing, but it's like, especially because Patty was like, well, I got to connect in Vermont. She's like, I could hook that up. And she's like, but I mean, you could come along. She's like, really? It's like, yeah, because you have a car. You can borrow Kevin's car. But I'm like, no, she said that, but she wants you to come too. I'm like, it's like, because she's actually really vibing with you now. And she's like, actually, I like your company. And it's like, it's the one person in her life she can be honest with. And Allison can be partially honest with, so they can finally just kind of like, oh my God, that sucks. I know, like once again, they can open up around each other. Once again, being around each other for like 10 years is the first time they've ever really been so honest and open with each other. So I thought that was pretty dope. Like I said, a lot of interesting things. I'm interested to continue seeing this budding of friendships between them, but also like their attempt to get drugs, is that going to work out? I get the feeling like, because it's, once again, I made the comparison of like this being kind of like, I might not have even said this for this show, because I know I referenced it with In the Dark being very Ozark-like, where it's just like when everything that can go wrong will go wrong, because it's just like, it's never simple. There's always going to be some issue around the corner that screws you up. I think we can definitely see that with this show, where it's like, oh yeah, like you're going to just go get the drugs, but like shenanigans ensued. I mean, like Good Girls is like that, In the Dark is like that, Ozark, it's very that like, oh, you wouldn't have a story if everything went perfectly. I mean, you still would, but it's funnier, the shenanigans that ensue when everything does go wrong. So I am really interested to see ultimately where all of this takes us. I'm curious what's going to be next with the whole Sam and Allison thing. I can definitely see that turning, very affair-y. I'm also curious what's up with like Patty and Kurt. What's also going to happen with the whole Marcus thing. He got busted, but I mean, granted, he turned on Terrence, so I'm curious to see if there's any more with that in the future. We'll have to wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.